Hi, everybody. We are back again with Branden Gard. That was so much amazing information he gave us in the last segment. And I wanted to ask Branden uh, if you would share with us your journey to the Eagle's Nest,
Mhm.
because I think that could be really impactful for a lot of people listening today.
Absolutely. I love sharing my story because, my story for a very long time was something I was very ashamed of,
Mhm.
very embarrassed of. But today I can truly say it's probably my best gift that I have because it really just highlights what the Lord's done in my life. And it's not about me,
Mhm.
Him.
Mhm.
So I can briefly share my story because there's a lot to it.
Yeah.
But so I'm 34 years old. And I was born and raised in Florida to a very good family that loved me very well. They did the very best they could for me. And as a kid, I didn't grow up thinking I was going to be a drug addict or an alcoholic. It kind of just happened. And so really growing up as a normal childhood, played sports. Um, my family, um, they did very well at teaching me right from wrong. I just at a young age like doing bad things sometimes. Uh,
Mm.
'Cause I was just I was an outdoor kid that just loved to get
Mhm.
into trouble sometimes. But for the most,
Mhm.
no, I didn't. I wasn't doing things to get in trouble. I was just a boy, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so playing football as a kid, my dad got me into sports, and playing football as a kid, I picked up things at a very young age that, um, my dad was very hard on me, especially sports, and I'll get more into that in a minute. But at a young age, I learned that when I performed when I performed in sports, when I did well in sports, I got affirmation. And
Mhm.
looking back now, I didn't understand it, but my love language is affirmation. What I
Mhm.
what I really struggle with is getting yelled at, and so
Mhm.
my father did the best he could to raise me right, but he had his own trauma, as a kid, and carrying that on into him as a father really poured into our relationship. And so, what he wanted was the best for me, but he
Mhm.
communicated it in a way that was what I seen as a kid as anger. And
Mhm.
so, when he would yell at me as a kid, it hurt me. It made me feel loved. But when I did good in sports or I did good in school, I was met with affirmation.
Mhm.
And so growing up, I learned at a young age that I had to perform for love in everything that I did. And
Mhm.
so when I was 17 years old, my parents got divorced. And to backtrack real quick, I did go to church as a child. My mom brought me to a Southern Baptist church.
Mhm.
And there I learned about Jesus. I learned about God. But I learned it from very, what appeared to be hurt people as well. And so
Mhm.
they portrayed this picture to me that there's a loving Jesus, but an angry God. That if I didn't operate a certain way, if I didn't address a
Mhm.
certain way, if I didn't talk a certain way,
Mhm.
I wasn't. I was a sinner, and He was mad
Mhm.
at me. And
Mhm.
so here I am performing for love of my family, trying to perform for God.
Mhm.
By the time I was, 16, 17 years old, I just couldn't get anything right. And
It's
so
exhausting. Yeah.
it's exhausting, yeah. And so like I said, I was a good kid. I didn't have the right belief systems. And another thing as a kid was, I couldn't really voice how I felt because when I did, I was met with, "Well, suck it up. You need to be tough." Well, I was a very sensitive kid, and so
Mhm.
when I suppressed my emotions from 5, 6, 7 up to 18 years old, by the time
Mhm.
I'm an adult, I have just a messed up belief system, a heart full of anger, and
Mhm.
uh, until 18, I channeled all my aggression into sports. Well, by the time I was 17, my parents got divorced. I was just about to get out of high school. Sports was over for me, and I didn't know how to perform for love. I didn't know what to do with my anger, and so I started drinking casually as a senior in high school. Uh,
Mhm.
and then it was a perfect storm. My family got divorced. I ended up getting in a fist fight my senior year. I got my nose broke, and
Oh.
I never really did drugs. I never tried anything, and I got my nose broken. I was prescribed painkillers, Well, I remember the day I did that for the first time to take away my nose pain. I realized it took away all the pain in me, and
Mm,
like a light switch turned on in my head that, like, man, these are the answer to all my problems. Not
mhm,
thinking I was about to go down a road that was very hard to get off of.
mm,
And so to fast forward, 19 years old, from 17 to 19, I progressively got worse. By 19, I was fully addicted to Oxycontin. I was drinking every single any chances I had of going to college, I had messed up. My family was divorced. I was basically living by myself in the house that I grew up in. I had a girlfriend that I dated all through high school. She had left me. All my friends have left me because of my actions and the way I was living my life. And so I was very lonely. I was very hopeless. And, I just didn't want to live anymore. And so, uh, I remember the day my family realized that something was off with me and something had changed. And it's like one day they realized, oh my God, Brandon's on drugs. And so
mm,
they sent me to a 35-day program thinking that would be my answer. I can get everything fixed. And really what it was a journey that I was just about to start going down, of treatment centers, doing whatever I could to get off of drugs. So I went to a treatment center, didn't work. I just learned other ways to do drugs,
mm,
uh, to not, be obvious on drugs, or really learn how to manipulate. And
mhm,
so, and like I said, I was a good kid growing up, and so I've always wanted to do right, and I
mhm,
knew I was better than this. So my thinking was get out of the state of Florida. So I joined the Navy at 19 years old. I left for 4 years, thinking that would change my life if I could just get somewhere else, be around, structure, and just something different.
mm,
Well, the problem was I brought me with me, and I was the
mm,
problem. So
mm,
I 4 years in the Navy, where I struggled very badly. When I wasn't out to sea, or I wasn't doing, when I wasn't working, I was drinking, and
mhm,
just continuing to suppress my issues, my hurt, my anger, my
mhm,
just my frustration and just hurt, man.
mhm,
And so getting out of the Navy, I came back home, back to Florida, picked up right where I left off with drugs, alcohol, and it was just this storm in my life of just not being able to get right. As bad as I wanted it, I just couldn't get right. I just didn't know how to deal with my hurt, my pain. And so one day, I was working for my father doing concrete. I felt like tired of, just butting heads with him. And I said, I quit. I went and got a job at a restaurant where I met a guy who told me about this program called Dunklin that I talked about in the last
mhm.
episode that Robbie had gone through. And, long story short, I ended up going there, spent 2 years out there.
Wow,
And
I didn't realize that. Yeah.
I, yeah, I spent 2 years out there. And it was something I failed to mention about Eagles Nest through the classes and the job sites. The number one thing that we do there is we teach the guys how to journal, and it's how to have a personal relationship with Jesus. Where every morning the guys journal, they give the things that they're thankful for. They talk about the things they struggle with, whether the day before or the week before, and they learn how to hear God's voice. And they allow and we sit in a place of silence, and we allow the Lord to speak to us, and where we write it down in our journal. And so I learned how to have a personal relationship with Jesus at this program down in Florida, and it changed my life. I learned about grace and the things that I never really understood as a kid, where, God's not angry at me. He's not shaking his head, frustrated with me not getting it right. I learned about grace and forgiveness and what true love was. And so, like I said, I spent 2 years out there in this program in South Florida. Well, the issue also was with me was, I was very prideful. I cared so much about what people thought of me. I was afraid to share the things that I really needed to share with. And for me, as a kid, things that happened to me that I never told anybody, things that happened to me sexually with another man,
Mm,
that it was very hard for me to share as a little kid, that
mm.
happened to me. This was something that happened when I was 8 years old. And from
Wow.
that life, things changed. I thought there's something wrong with me. I thought I was broken. I thought no one would understand. And looking back now, it was obviously a lie that the enemy had planted in my head that I couldn't share with nobody. And it kept,
Mhm.
And so I didn't share that when I was out there for 2 years. And so when I left, I had a great relationship with the Lord, back with my family, my relationship. I learned how to be in a relationship with other people. But those insecurities and lies that I believed about myself were still there. And so
Mhm.
character wasn't where it needed to be. And so after a year, my life was back in a mess. It's
Mhm.
just even worse this time now because I knew right from wrong. I knew how to
Yeah.
have a relationship with the Lord. It's just I was so locked in bondage of fear of what people thought of me. And so I called this program after a year, tried to get back there, and honestly, the program director there was like, Brandon, the best thing I think you need to do is just get out of the state of Florida and start over. And so he
Mm.
told me about Eagles Nest. He told me about it being in Virginia. It's in the mountains. It's a great place, a lot like Dunklin. And so that's what led me to Eagles Nest was just
Wow.
um, a life of trying to do right, just not being able to understand how to do it. And so when I went to,
Mhm.
I was finally at the place where like, you know what, I'm tired of destroying my life. I don't
Mhm.
think about it anymore. I got to get right with these things. And I came here and I shared these things. And the crazy thing was people didn't view me the way I viewed myself. They actually it started this chain reaction where other guys in the program were able like, hey, you know what? The same thing happened to me. I feel comfortable sharing this now. And a lot of people got healing from that and freedom,
Mhm.
and it changed my life, you know,
Mm.
and it showed me that, just because I've made mistakes or bad things have happened to me doesn't make me a bad person, doesn't make me,
Mhm.
and it's
Amen.
just my testimony and it set me free. And now I can use it to help set other people free,
That's
through Jesus.
amazing.
So,
That's amazing. I had not heard all that, and, thank you so much for sharing because I think our kids go through things we have no idea.
of course, yeah. And like I said,
Mhm.
he thought he was doing the best he could. He just wanted better for me. It's just his ways of doing it. Um, as a child, I just didn't understand. I
Mhm.
now and see that, and I can forgive him. It doesn't make it right. It makes it easier
Mhm.
to understand what he's been through and the trauma. But the things that I needed, he wasn't giving me.
Mm.
Like I needed a father that would listen to me when I was hurting.
Yeah.
Uh, that didn't make me feel bad for hurting. That
Mhm.
feel like I was weak if I talked about my emotions.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, that's the things that I needed to talk about. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when we come back, can we, talk a little bit about, some of those signs that parents do miss and, um, maybe some suggestions for families that might be struggling with their child and not understanding what's going on or, maybe like me, missing signs in your own children because you're going through trauma. The whole family is walking through trauma. And I'm sure you've worked with, plenty of families where it's a constant. I mean, I look at my students, some of my students who are walking through, and I want to bring them all home with me, but they're walking through fires at home, and um, a lot is missed by a lot of people, and no, it's the children that are suffering, that are left standing alone. And so, if we could talk a little bit more about maybe some of the signs that
Mhm.
parents can look for, and um, to help our kids.
Yeah,
All right,
absolutely.
everybody. That was amazing. Amazing testimony. We're grateful that you shared that. We'll be back, everybody.